Hey there, history lovers. Buckle up, because today we're diving into an epic clash that shaped the ancient world in ways you can't even imagine. Picture this. Two powerhouse cities, Rome and Sparta, locked in a struggle for dominance. One, a rising empire with dreams of ruling the world. The other, a legendary warrior society feared by all. What happened when these giants collided? How did Rome manage to outsmart and overpower the mighty Spartans, changing the course of history forever? Let's unravel this incredible story of strategy, betrayal, and sheer grit. A tale that still echoes through time. To understand this monumental showdown, we need to go back to the roots of these two iconic civilizations. Rome, in its early days, was just a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber River in Italy. But don't let that fool you. Rome had big dreams. By the 3rd century BC, it was growing fast, swallowing up nearby lands and building an army that was disciplined and adaptable. Romans weren't just fighters, they were thinkers. They studied their enemies, learned from them, and turned their weaknesses into strengths. This knack for strategy would become their secret weapon. On the other side of the Mediterranean, we have Sparta, a name that still sends shivers down the spine. Located in the rugged region of Laconia in southern Greece, Sparta was the ultimate warrior society. From childhood, Spartan boys were trained to be soldiers. They lived for battle, with no room for weakness. Their lives were all about discipline, sacrifice, and loyalty to the state. The Spartan army, especially their elite hoplite warriors, was a terrifying force. Armed with spears, shields, and unbreakable courage, they dominated Greece for centuries. When people heard Sparta, they thought of invincibility. But here's the thing. Rome and Sparta weren't always enemies. In fact, they didn't even cross paths directly for a long time. By the time Rome was rising, Sparta's golden age was fading. After their famous stand against Persia at Thermopylae in 480 BC, Sparta had already started to decline. Internal problems, constant wars, and a shrinking population weakened them. Still, their reputation as fierce warriors lived on, and they remained a symbol of military might. So, how did these two powers finally clash? It wasn't a straight-up battle between Rome and Sparta, but rather a series of events where Rome outmaneuvered Sparta through cunning alliances and sheer persistence. Let's set the stage. By the 2nd century BC, Rome was expanding its influence across the Mediterranean. They had already taken control of much of Italy and were looking east toward Greece. Greece at this time wasn't a united country, but a collection of city-states, including Sparta, often bickering among themselves. Sparta, though past its prime, was still a player in Greek politics. They were part of the Achaean League, a group of city-states trying to stand up to bigger powers like Macedon. But Rome saw an opportunity in this divided landscape. They didn't rush in with swords swinging. Instead, they played a smarter game. Rome's strategy was all about divide and conquer. They knew that taking on all of Greece at once would be a disaster. So they picked their battles carefully. They made deals with some city-states, promising protection or wealth in exchange for loyalty. At the same time, they stirred up trouble between others, making sure no one could unite against them. Sparta, proud and stubborn as ever, didn't trust Rome. They wanted to stay independent and keep their warrior traditions alive. But Rome had other plans. One key moment came in 195 BC, during what's known as the War against Nabis. Nabis was a controversial Spartan leader, often called a tyrant. He ruled with an iron fist, seizing power and wealth. Some say he even tortured his enemies. His aggressive reforms, like freeing slaves to boost his army, made him a lot of enemies both inside and outside Sparta. Rome saw this as a perfect chance to step in. They teamed up with the Achaean League and other Greek states to take Nabis down. Under the command of a Roman general named Titus Quinctius Flamininus, they marched on Sparta. Now, this wasn't a classic Rome versus Sparta battle like you might imagine. Sparta's forces under Nabis fought hard, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Nabis had about 15,000 troops, including mercenaries, but Rome and their allies brought a much larger force. After several skirmishes, Nabis was forced to surrender. Rome didn't destroy Sparta outright. Instead, they stripped Nabis of his power and forced Sparta to join the Achaean League under Roman influence. It was a humiliating blow for a city that once stood for unbreakable strength. Nabis himself didn't last long. He was assassinated shortly after by rivals, likely with Rome quietly cheering from the sidelines. This was a turning point. Sparta lost its independence and became just another piece in Rome's growing puzzle. But why didn't Rome just crush Sparta completely? Well, Rome was clever. They knew that wiping out a city with such a legendary reputation could backfire, inspiring rebellions across Greece. Instead, they turned Sparta into a shadow of its former self, keeping it under control without making it a martyr. This was classic Roman strategy. Win without looking like the bad guy. Let's zoom out for a second and talk about why this mattered. Sparta's fall under Roman influence wasn't just about one city. It was a sign of Rome's unstoppable rise. By the time Sparta was subdued, Rome was already on its way to becoming the master of the Mediterranean. They defeated other Greek powers like Macedon in a series of wars, with the final blow coming at the Battle of Cynocephaly in 197 BC, just a couple of years before the campaign against Nabis. Rome's legions proved they could adapt to any enemy, whether it was Macedonian phalanxes or Spartan hoplites. What made Rome so successful against a warrior culture like Sparta? It wasn't just brute force. Rome had a knack for logistics and organization that Sparta couldn't match. The Roman army was huge, with tens of thousands of soldiers ready to fight at a moment's notice. They had a system to recruit and train troops quickly, pulling in men from all over their territories. A single Roman legion could have up to 5,000 soldiers, and they often deployed multiple legions at once. Sparta, on the other hand, relied on a small, elite force. By this time, their population of true Spartan warriors, called Spartiates, had dwindled to just a few thousand. They couldn't sustain long wars or replace losses easily. Rome also had money on their side. Their expanding empire brought in massive wealth, which they used to fund wars and buy alliances. Historians estimate that by the 2nd century BC, Rome's annual revenue was equivalent to millions of dollars in today's terms. They could afford to hire mercenaries, build roads for faster troop movements, and even pay off potential enemies. Sparta, stuck in its rigid old-school ways, didn't have that kind of cash flow. Their economy was based on farming and the labor of enslaved people called helots, who often rebelled, draining Spartan resources further. Another big difference was adaptability. Spartan warriors were trained for one style of fighting: close combat with spears in a tight formation called a phalanx. It was deadly on the right terrain, but inflexible. Rome, however, mixed things up. Their legions used a formation called the manipular system, which let them adjust to different situations. They had heavy infantry, light skirmishers, and even cavalry, all working together. If a battle went south, Romans could regroup and try a new tactic. Spartans, bound by tradition, often couldn't pivot like that. But let's not forget the power of politics. Rome didn't just fight with swords. They fought with words. They sent diplomats to sow discord among their enemies, promising rewards to those who sided with them. In Greece, they played city-states against each other, making sure no one could form a united front. Sparta, for all its military glory, wasn't great at diplomacy. Their fight-or-die mentality didn't leave much room for compromise or alliances. So, while Spartans were busy defending their honor, Romans were busy making friends, or at least pretending to. Now, let's talk about the aftermath. With Sparta under control, Rome tightened its grip on Greece. By 146 BC, after the Battle of Corinth, Greece officially became a Roman province. Sparta, once the terror of the ancient world, was reduced to a tourist attraction. Yes, you heard that right. By the time of the Roman Empire, people visited Sparta not to see warriors, but to watch staged reenactments of their old training rituals, almost like a historical theme park. It's a sad end for a city that once made empires tremble. But Sparta's legacy didn't disappear. Even as Rome took over, the idea of Spartan courage and discipline lived on. Roman writers and thinkers admired Sparta, often holding them up as an example of toughness and simplicity. Some Roman generals even studied Spartan tactics, though they adapted them to fit their own needs. In a way, Sparta's spirit survived through Rome, even if the city itself did not. So, how much did Rome spend to pull this off? While exact numbers are hard to pin down, we know that Roman military campaigns were expensive. A single war could cost the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars today, factoring in soldiers' pay, equipment, and supplies. For example, a Roman soldier's annual salary was around $120 in today's money. And with armies numbering in the tens of thousands, that adds up fast. Add to that the cost of ships, weapons, and bribes for allies, and you've got a budget that would make modern governments sweat. But for Rome, it was worth every penny. Controlling Greece, including Sparta, gave them access to trade routes, resources, and strategic bases worth billions in today's terms. Let's wrap this up by looking at the big picture. Rome's victory over Sparta wasn't just about one battle or one city. It was about a new way of thinking. Rome showed the world that power isn't just about having the strongest warriors. It's about strategy, flexibility, and knowing when to fight and when to talk. Sparta, for all its bravery, couldn't keep up with a world that was changing fast. Their rigid system, once their greatest strength, became their downfall. This clash of titans teaches us something timeless. History isn't just made by the strongest or the bravest. It's made by those who can adapt and think ahead. Rome didn't just defeat Sparta. They rewrote the rules of power. And in doing so, they built an empire that would last for centuries, shaping everything from law to language to the way we think about government today. So, what do you think? Could Sparta have done anything differently to hold off Rome? Or was their fate sealed the moment Rome set its sights on Greece? Let me know in the comments. And if you love diving into this epic story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more history adventures. Until next time, keep exploring the past. It's full of surprises.